Hi, I'm Joe.
And I'm Dave.
And we're the hosts of the Chasing Tommorow Podcast, where we bring you stories that delve into the science and spirit behind intriguing people doing extraordinary things. We're on.
Welcome to the Chasing Tommorow Podcast. This week, it is episode 50. This week, we're going to talk to a community constructor, a builder, someone who challenges everybody and wants everyone to push their limits and succeed. We're talking to Marc Hodulich this week. Now, Marc is the co-founder of 29029. Now, if you haven't heard of it, check into this podcast. And it's so cool. It's so rad. One day I want to get down to America and try it myself. I think it's the coolest thing going. Marc has got finishes at the Leadville 100, the Hennepin 100, and Ironman Mount Tremblant. Marc has founded multiple nationwide event series converging community, athletics, and philanthropy. Now, Marc ended up a few years ago meeting Jesse Itzler. Now, the two of them, upon conversation, started wondering, what if they ended up putting together an event where it was more about vert than distance? And what about if you could end up in one event pushing your limits? Each and every one of us has our limits, and pushing your limits to 29,029 feet. That's the elevation of Everest from sea level all the way to the top of Everest. And what if you could do this all in one event? And this is where 29029 was born. Now, I'm pleased to welcome community builder Marc Hodulich to the Chasing Tommorow podcast. Welcome, Marc.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Flattering introduction. Certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, Marc, certainly I had my experience with 29029 at the Vermont event a couple years ago. But I think that's sort of almost the end of the story. So we got to wind our way back a little bit. It's like we watched a movie and then we got to see the beginning. So even way before Ironman or your 100-mile races, as you were growing up as a kid, was like big challenges something you liked thinking about? Maybe you were athletic in high school or college or something like that, or maybe you just rode your bike 50 miles around your neighborhood. Like, what was Marc like growing up that might have given us an indication that one day he'd be out there getting thousands of people to do stuff they never could have imagined doing?
Well, my parents, who are visiting Atlanta right now where I'm based, would tell you I was a pain in the ass. I wanted to shape things my own way. I wanted to change and bend reality. I didn't really ever want to do things a conventional way. But, my dad was a runner and a marathoner. He still runs at 70, just turned 71. So, my dad, I would see him come home from work every day and he would go run. And it started off as a kid waiting in the front yard for him to finish his run to play baseball or football with me. And that eventually, developed into joining those runs for a couple miles, not every day, and then going to local kind of all-comers track meets, right? And I played Little League baseball, I played high school baseball, I was okay, but I was a good runner. And the big goals for me early on I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. There was this thing called the Brookwood Kids Mile. And that was like the thing, like you can only do it until you were in 8th grade. And, you wanted to win it before you went. And that was a big goal of mine. You kind of had to run a 450 something mile on the road, and it was pretty fast to do if you were in 7th or 8th grade. And I was able to win that once or twice, before going to high school. So, there weren't huge goals, but there were goals, right? Believe me, if in the world that we're in of an ultra endurance sport, you'll find kids in 7th and 8th grade doing far bigger things than that. But for me, in the little world that I was in, it was, wanting to at least challenge myself and have not only a time-based, but a place-based goal that did kind of shape some of my year. I mean, I still play sports. I didn't like taper for these races or anything. I didn't take it too seriously, but I did have those goals at a young age, where before that, I went to a Catholic school and it was called the Toy Bowl. And every year, the 5 or 6 Catholic schools got together and had an athletics competition, and that, we did an 880. And it was wanting to win that at an early age. And before that, it was races around the schoolyard. So, most of my things catered towards middle distance races when I was younger that kind of shaped that drive and desire to kind of perform on race day.
Yeah, and so Mark, I'm a parent myself, and so is Joe. And we've talked offline many times about parenting and how really it's not telling your kids what to do; it's mirroring for your children, showing them the way of sorts. Would you say that your father, consistently showing up and pushing himself, and even now, like you say, as a 70-year-old, he's still running marathons. Do you think that was a major, he was a major role model when it comes to what you're doing now, or were there other people in your life that also showed you this?
Sure. Look, I think first and foremost, yeah, my dad was, and still is. And it was interesting for me, being as you say, being a married. I have two boys, Chase and Dylan, who are 11 and 9. And the big thing for me is you kind of know early on what your kids may or may not be good at. They're predisposed, maybe, and you see some of their talents and skills before they do. And the big thing for me was my dad didn't push me into these things, right? I chose to want to do them. And, my youngest guy could be, I ran track at Auburn. I wasn't fantastic, but I was a collegiate runner. He could be really damn good, but he hates it. So I don't make him run. There's times where as a punishment, we got to go out and put a couple miles in, we got to build some fitness for a sports season or something like that. But my 11-year-old would be an amazing swimmer. He swam one season and won a bunch of local meets and a bunch of regional meets and decided he didn't like it at all. And I didn't blame him. I trained for Ironman. I did not like staring at that black line. It wasn't for me, right? So the short answer is, look, it wasn't my dad, continues to be my dad. But, at the same time, it is, it's something where I find it incumbent upon myself not to push my kids, right? And that, if they decide to want to pursue other things then I'm interested in, I need to let them find out where their passions lie, even if it may not be something that they've been predisposed or that I think they've been predisposed to be really good at.
Yeah. Yes, very, very helpful, right, for a lot of the people who listen into the podcast. And as you sort of went through your own journey, one of the sort of philosophies that I took up early on was, this mindset: if you want to go to a party, then have one. Don't wait around for people to invite you. Like, invite everyone in. And so, in some sense, not getting sort of too close to 29 or 29, but there's a little bit of that in there, like, hey, I want other people to do it, but I'm going to also post it so that I do it and keep it going. Let's talk a little bit about the transition. So, you're a good runner, you go do these kinds of events, and then, like, how does that bridge to this sort of idea that, others should come along on the journey? Because one thing about running, right, is it's rather solitary. A lot of these events we do, Ironman, very solitary. You might train with people, but there is no team. You really don't necessarily care what someone else's finish is unless they're your good friend. We
Sure.
go, we disappear. And so how did you transition into sort of the idea of this community builder, this guy who wants to help people sort of start to achieve some of their potential?
Yeah, look, I think I'll try not to make this answer too long, but professionally, professionally, look, I was a management consultant. I was not trying to win road races. I was living in Manhattan. I was running to and from the gym to stay in shape, and didn't get into endurance sport after college. I had multiple stress fractures. It was kind of like, I want to do something other than run. And through my 20s and early 30s, running was just a way to stay in shape, running to and from the gym to lift weights and be fit. And to bridge the gap really was my oldest guy was 7 at the time, a little over 4 years ago. I had left being a management consultant. I had gotten into doing some live event production of nothing else other than, wanting to go to that party and having it myself. So I was organizing things that we did in college, like the Beer Mile, and I brought that across the entire country and entertained almost 100,000 people in 2014 and 2015. So did nationwide event series. I had this event, the Wall Street Decathlon, that was raising millions of dollars for Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, which started off as a NFL combine, kind of meets the CrossFit Games for friends that worked on Wall Street that, I saw being very competitive and having arguments about who could do more dips or pull-ups. And I was like, I'll organize an event. And, that got to be really big and had some financial and professional success. But the main thing was philanthropic success. That was raising millions of dollars a year for pediatric cancer research. So some of those things I kind of fell into by being someone that would just take action. I'm a branding and marketing guy. So I was able to create cool concepts, but they were all built around community, right? The company that had BeerFit, which was ultimately unsuccessful, it was successful for a bit, but it was combining beer and running, which a lot of people were doing. I was just doing it under the guise of doing a beer mile, right? Because I thought that was cool in college when you did it at the end of the track season. And I saw people's eyes light up when I would tell them I can drink 4 beers and run a mile in less than 6 minutes. They'd be like, what? And I was like, oh, maybe more people would want to try this. And so getting to really ultra endurance sport came from my best friend, Matt Burrell, who did continue with endurance sport. He's done Boston numerous times, and he was doing his first Ironman, and I went down with my family down to the Panama City area, did Ironman Florida. And my 7-year-old looked at me and was like, Dad, you can do an Ironman, right? And I looked at him and I'm like, yeah. And I was like, oh, I told him yes, like I need to actually go and do it. Because his expectation was, Dad, you said you can do it, you're going to do it, right? I didn't own a bike. I couldn't swim 50 yards across the pool the first time I went, but I had 8 months to get ready for an Ironman. And I had a good level of physical fitness. I was running 25 miles a week. But that's really what got me into kind of the ultra endurance type realm, which I don't know if a lot of people would consider an Ironman ultra endurance, but I think 15 hours if you're average Ironman finisher. Yeah. So that really got me into just that vibe. And, I did my Ironman in around 11 hours. And I went back to the finish line at hour 16 or 17, and I saw the last people finishing. And that community vibe really got to me. Mm-hmm. And it was just something where I thought, wow, like, it's great that everyone comes out here at the end, but the people that I was with, I'm not competing for a Kona slot, right? Like, 11 hours is fine for a good first time, but I'm like an hour and a half from qualifying for anything. But I couldn't believe how competitive the people around me were. Like, asking me my age, how many Ironmans I've done, like wanting to beat me. And I was like, that was the first marathon I'd ever run was an Ironman. I'm like, I'm just trying to finish this thing. Like, can't we just have a nice conversation and we're all being competitive? And I was really not knocking the Ironman brand. I'm a huge fan of Ironman. It's phenomenal event production, great community at the end. I'm a big advocate for them, but I just thought the community at the end of the race, what if that existed all the way through an event, right? What if we weren't competing for Kona slots, which I wasn't even doing. I was just trying to get the best out of myself that day and finish. But that's really what started sparking this desire of like, what are those events you could do together? You'd accomplish a huge goal, but people would be helping you just as much as you helping yourself. So that's really where those ideas started to come to play. Like, well, I have some success in event production. I have some success in branding and launching and running my own event production company, being an entrepreneur. And I met Jesse, who was the ultimate community builder. And, Jesse is a ultra endurance athlete himself, a New York Times bestselling author. He's been an entrepreneur and had great exits to Coca-Cola and Berkshire Hathaway with Marquis Jet. He's a very enigmatic, interesting guy. And we developed a friendship of just saying what we thought was missing in endurance sport. And that those all were just convening at the same time. The world has a weird way of bringing people together when you have ideas. And we were both looking for a little bit more of a community as we did some of these events. And unfortunately, or fortunately for me, BeerFit wasn't quite panning out the way that I thought it would financially. And I was gracefully, deciding not to continue another season of events and had the bandwidth to pursue this idea with Jesse.
Well, I think, Mark, I think you hit the nail on the head, and I think you were kind of, working your way around something, is that in the last 15, 20 years, we used to see personal fulfillment and objectives as being very linear, like, the running a marathon or completing an Ironman. But now we're seeing all these different events like your event popping up, and even the beer mile. I mean, when the beer mile first came up, I was just blown away that people could run that fast and drinking beer. Now, don't get me wrong, I love drinking beer and I love trying to run fast, but not doing the two together. They typically don't end well for me. But then we're seeing all these events like your event, where it really is about thinking outside the box, and that it's not a marathon finish, it's not an Ironman finish, it's not. And so talk us through the 29029 and some of your ideas, the community coming forward. How does the event work? And I know how it works because I desperately wanted to come down to America and do one.
Sure.
But tell our audience about how it works and what is so unique about this, and what will you find there from a community standpoint?
Sure. I mean, look, the overall idea of 29029 was very simple. Everest has been something that's been done on bikes. It started in New Zealand, and it was something where people just ride up a hill on their bike, ride down, and continue doing it until they climb 29,029 feet. I was so intrigued by the idea, and I thought, well, people can do this on foot, and what if you used a ski resort as the venue and you took the gondola down? Because going downhill is so rough on the body. And in numerous ultra races that I want to give credit to, you Everest along the way, right? If you do the Hard Rock 100, you're going to climb 29,000 feet over 100 miles. And that's so big and it's so bold. It's just not approachable to that many people. But if you think about what is the biggest thing you could do, for most people, it's climb Mount Everest. If you just think about what's the biggest thing you could do on Earth, it's climb the tallest mountain on Earth. And so the marketing story, and I believe inherently we all want a story to tell. Why do most people do an Ironman? So for a year, 2, 3 years, they can tell their friends and family, I'm training for an Ironman, right? I mean, legitimately, you're doing it for yourself, but part of why you're doing it is to tell the story.
Yeah,
Yeah, innately, we all want a good story to tell. And what if you said, hey, I'm going to climb the vertical height of Mount Everest in a weekend? And, Jesse and I had linked up early on with our friend Colin O'Brady, who is a world record holder for the 7 summits, who had summited Everest before, and thought, well, he brings some credibility to what we're doing. And we all kind of started tossing around this idea. And it's really what the weekend is you have 36 hours to hike up a mountain and take the gondola down at your own pace. It's self-scored. You take this triangle logo that's on a cattle brand and burn it into a wood board. There's no chip timing. The only timing is a 36-hour clock that ticks from 36 hours down to 1 second. And that's the allotted time that you have at your own pace to hike up, take the gondola down, and continue to repeat until you climb 29,029 feet. So, look, to me, when I did Leadville, there were 4 people that were racing Leadville. Legitimately at the start line, there were probably 3 to 4 people that had a legitimate chance at winning that race. The other 700 of us were just trying to finish. And it was true community on the trail. You're having real conversations, you're creating real bonds with people, but it's in a pretty trying scenario, right? Because you're in the middle of nowhere and you do meet interesting people, but then you never get a chance to reconnect with them. And the idea of community of 29 was you have one base camp. You're hiking the same trail again and again. And Joe may have good moments while I'm having a bad moment. He can stop and talk to me. And later on, that can be flipped and we can see each other again. And that ability to be spending that much time in such a condensed area while you're tackling something so physically and mentally taxing just creates a vulnerability that exists in so few places. And that brings out authenticity in people. And when you strip out all of the, I'm a CEO, I'm a founder, I'm an Ironman, here's my things, and it's just like, I'm Dave, right? And I'm tired, right? You build real bonds with people because the walls are gone and you're just being your most, I think, the truest version of yourself. And I can't sit here and tell you 4 years after we created it that we sat down and were like, we're going to create an event where you find the truest version of yourself. And others in the community showcase the best of humanity. But that's what it became. And I think it honestly became that because we had a really good format. We got a little bit lucky that the format has drawn in such great people. And then we've really held it really tight. And, as your podcast host can share with you, we really, truly care more about the customer than anything else.
Mhm.
And long term, that creates enterprise value, that creates profitability. Those things come. But if you truly care about the customer experience first and put that above everything, that has allowed us to curate such a deep and meaningful experience for people. And I think overall create more enterprise value down the road. And at the end of the day, I'm an entrepreneur, but I really do genuinely care about each and every participant's experience. And that is something that's been unwavering since day one.
Yeah, I think that, Mark, as I listened to you, and of course, as I said, I did it with a buddy of mine, Paolo, and he had never done anything like it before. And I had, similar to you, had done Ironman, had done Leadville, had done some other big challenges and got out there. And I think that this sort of, the piece that is the most remarkable for me is the everyone else. It's not the people who know that they can do it. It's the people who go there not knowing they can. And that is so hard sometimes to get them to the place of their potential. It's really hard. There's more latent potential sitting in living rooms and at office desks today that if we could tap into it, the world would be a completely different world. And sadly, there's just a lot of people who don't, for whatever the reason, not being judgmental, right? It hasn't been their context. And you create this very safe environment to go do something that's ridiculously hard, but achievable. It's like, I always said the marathon was great because it was like the perfect distance. Really hard, but a lot of people can do it. And 29:029 is really hard, but a lot of people can do it. Part of it's that community. I remember going up the mountain quite a few times and saying to someone, would you mind me telling you how to use your poles? Because I think I could help you. And they'd be like, no, I'd love, please tell me, because I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I'm like, okay, well, uphill, you have to hold it like this, much different than you are. They'll give you more leverage, and they're like, thank you. And they're all open to it. And then they get benefit from it. And then you disappear, and they're like, who was that voice, kind of, because it isn't about that for me. It's like, then they have the power, and they might have told someone else at that point, and you're right, your crew does a phenomenal job, but the phenomenal job is in setting a context for people to find something that they wouldn't find themselves in themselves. And I, you get to watch some of the stories, the journey there, right? What they had to do to train, to get ready, to be bold and brave enough, and then to show up and be psyched every time you brand that next level on the board. And then, Dave, what they have is in your last lap, you wear a red vest or whatever you would call it, bib. And then everyone knows you're on your last lap and they're cheering you on. And now you feel like, you're Superman. And so it's down to that level of detail that you guys have that makes it even more, sort of rewarding for people. But you have a couple of good stories of some people who just you remember, like they told you something at the end, Mark. What were they like?
Look, I got to tell you, the amount of stories, it's overwhelming. And I think for me and my team, it's one where I'm not going to say I'm a complete check the box and move on to the next thing guy, but I'm very forward looking. And we probably do not take enough time to sit back and reflect fully upon the impacts that this event has had on people, because our average participant has never done a marathon. My wife did this event, and I'm not knocking her. My wife is a stud, but my wife had never done a 10K. She ran her first 6 mile or longer distance in training for this event. So, to be able to take something on like that and be vulnerable and not know how it's going to work. And to feel comfortable taking that kind of risk of failure, right? That's where a lot of people, they're just scared to fail. And I appreciate you saying that we've created a safe environment. So the stories that stick out to me the most are, Jason Canaris is a gentleman that has come down from Toronto numerous times. And the first time he came to our Utah event, his goal was to climb once. And, it takes 13 times going up Snow Basin to Everest. And he got in 4 laps and had to leave with some altitude sickness. And he had some health issues and, trained for a year and lost a significant amount of weight and came back and did 11 laps and of 13, and Jason's going to get his red bib this year. I fully believe Jason's going to finish, but it's feeling that support in the community and making that type of lifestyle shift, but also coming to an event where he knew he wasn't going to finish year one. And I try to put myself in that position of, would I have ever towed the line at Leadville knowing I probably wasn't going to make it past 12 miles or 15 miles? No way. Like, I am way too vain in my athletic accomplishments, and I'm way too shallow to have a DNF on my record. Like, not finishing has never once gone into my mindset, ever. And to think about the other end of the spectrum, where someone doing one hike can be just an unbelievable accomplishment, and finding a way to stretch themselves to 4 is really what this event is really about. And I think of some of the women who have done this event, like Lori Scala, who's terrific mother, unbelievably smart, gave up her career to help her husband build his business and start a family. And it was her time to shine. You know, it was her time for everyone else in the household to kind of look at her and support her and her goal, right? And the empowerment that gives to kind of say, you get to cheer for me, and how that's felt for a lot of women who've taken a lot of sacrifice to build a home and a lifestyle for their husbands and the rest of their family, and they get to be the hero. And it's done in a manner where it's an unbelievably huge accomplishment. That's what I think a lot of these people do not realize when they go from like never done a half marathon to doing something where the average finisher takes 30 hours. Like, Leadville took me 26 and change, right? Like, I mean, I covered 100 miles. Like, I think it's more impressive the longer that it takes, because it's more opportunity that you have to quit. It's more opportunity for doubt to creep in and you to stop. It's really hard. I mean, if you talk to elite Ironmen who are doing an Ironman in under 8 hours, they can't fathom how people stay out there for 16. You know, and so I think it's a true testament to how strong all humans are, and the ability that if the goal is big enough and the support system is there, people can wildly exceed their own expectations if given a forum to just continue to keep climbing and keep going. And that's really what we're trying to foster here.
No, and I agree, Mark. And I think that everybody's got a very different story, and and the stories that they're telling are their stories. What's so cool about your event, and maybe the only real comparison that I could end up bringing up right now is a story that I have with Big's Backyard. Is down in Tennessee, Lazarus Lake puts on this great event, basically 4.18 miles every hour until you can't. And it's so cool because he puts on this event and he does things like Barkley marathons, and so he's a lot like you, Mark, where he's very curious, and he puts on these events and sits back and then watches. And it's so fun to sit and watch him watching. And I had one really intimate experience with him. I ended up running, I think it was 53 hours a couple of years ago there. And it was right on the second night.
Can we just pause there for a second?
Yeah.
53 hours, 212 miles.
Yeah, about there. Yeah, you bet.
All right. I wanted to just level set. That's just ridiculous.
Well, thank you, Mark. Thanks. But no, it was really interesting because it was the second night, and I ended up lying down and taking a nap, and I was lying down. Lazarus Lake was sitting by the fire, or he was standing by the fire smoking a cigarette, because that's what he does, and he was watching me. And as I lie down and I close my eyes, he was standing there watching me. And then woke up about 10 minutes later, I opened my eyes, and Lazarus hasn't moved except for his cigarette was gone. And he was watching me. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to flip him the bird. I wanted to give him the middle finger and tell him to go to hell. And what the hell are you making me do here, man? This is all your fault. But, it was really interesting because he truly wanted to create an event where people found the bottom of their well. What was going to run out first? The bottom of the well? What were you going to hit first? The bottom of the well or the length of your rope? And I see that that's what you're doing here, Mark, is you're putting this challenge in front of people, something really hard. in order for them to go and try their very best. And if they can succeed at this, what else can they do in life? And, when it comes to parenting, when it comes to, developing relationships with loved ones and calling your mother and dealing with how difficult things that are bound to come up, you're creating an opportunity for people to find their next gear and their excellence. Would you agree?
Look, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the amount of times that, there was a going away party on Saturday, and I've really cut back on any type of alcohol consumption in the last year or two. Not that I drank a bunch before, but, I really cut back, and, I had a couple glasses of wine, and I didn't feel great Sunday morning. And almost as a punishment to myself, I'd already hit my mileage goal for the week, and I'm not the runner that you all are, but I went out and I ran 15 miles, right? And my oldest son was like, I was going to go out and run 3 or 4. And I ran 15. He's like, why'd you run so long? Like, that's so long. And I was like, once you run 100 miles, like 15 isn't far, right? Your idea and concept of what's hard, what's long completely shifts, right? So that little story just for me is, even having been a collegiate athlete, right? 15 miles felt like a really long way. And I'm not going to say that during some of the run when I was not properly hydrated or properly nourished, didn't hurt some, but I can always reflect back on, I know how I felt on Hope Pass, right? I know how I felt like this is nothing. Like, you can push through it. So I do think it shifts so much of your mindset. And you're right, it does play into other aspects of your life. The thing that I'll say is, like, you have to utilize that muscle, right? And that's the thing for me, is that it's not easy. And so you constantly have to go back, and you don't have to do 29 and 29 again. You don't have to go back and do bigs. You don't have to do an Ironman every year. I think there's a certain almost addiction that can come some with the finish line, right? Because you're chasing finish lines, as great as they are. The big thing for me is just find areas to test yourself, because if you get too far away from it, the benefit, the longer it's gone, the less benefit you get from it. So I think you just have to sharpen that tool, and there's opportunities to do that all the time. I mean, I was on a podcast a couple weeks ago, and they were like, well, what hard stuff are you doing now? And I was like, this morning I tried to run 10 miles at 6-minute pace for no other reason than it was mentally challenging and really hard. Like, it's not that I'm that fast. That's not that fast. Realistically speaking, it's just not. I got a 50-year-old buddy, Ken Rideout, that just ran a 2:28 marathon at 50. Me trying to go out and run on a flat course, a 60-minute 10-miler is not that fast. I just did it to just challenge myself.
Yeah.
No reason. I have no races on the calendar. There's no one at the finish line. It was just at mile 6 when it really started to hurt. How was I going to react? Right. So I think you just have to try to find those areas. That could be starting a podcast. That could be calling a loved one that you've had a fight with, as you mentioned. That could be volunteer work. You just have to search for those areas to seek some discomfort, or I do think you lose the benefits. It can make it easier to do the next big thing. But if you don't continue to challenge yourself in some respect, I do think that muscle eventually atrophies, and you just can't go back to that place as much as you would like. So I'm not telling anyone listening that every year the bar has to get raised. I'm just saying, just find little things that are mentally challenging. I don't know. I've said this on numerous podcasts. I don't know if I came up with this quote or not. I should really figure it out. But I said, I look for opportunities where the mind opens the door to quitting, and you have to decide if you're going to allow the body through it or not, right? Like, I'm just trying to find areas where, just to myself, no finish line, am I going to quit, or am I going to be proud of myself and find a way not to quit? So I just try on a pretty regular basis to just find opportunities where I've just set these small little goals for myself, and I can figure out if I can hit them or not.
Yeah. I'd say, I think it's, so the interesting part, Mark, is that you're bringing it at this very sort of conscious level, this kind of idea. There is, I've been listening to Dr. Andrew Huberman, he's a research neurobiologist out of Stanford. If you ever want to listen to a podcast, he's great, because a good hour or 15-minute run, and you'll learn more about neuroscience than you can.
Oh, wow.
And he feels obligated to share it, because he says, his research is funded by our tax dollars. So I'm like, oh, good, I can get something taxes I pay. But what's interesting that there's a biology that you're sort of intersecting with your Venn diagram here on that sort of consciousness level, saying, I want to run through a door to find out whether my body will quit or not. And then there's the neurobiology that actually is the validator. It's the reason why that actually works, but we don't have a very good understanding of it. But that the human body brain system works when it's used, not when it's not. One of my favorite blog posts I ever wrote was about, the rusty swing set. So you bought a swing set for your kids when they were young, they stop using it, you leave it out in the backyard, and one day you walk back there like, why is this a piece of junk? It's all rusty. But had they been using it every year, there would be no rust. That's what happens to us. And so, and what's underlying it is that there is the way the human physiology works, whether it's the mitochondria that continues to grow, whether it's the dopamine receptor that's triggered that makes us want to continue to go, the endorphins and the adrenaline and the norepinephrine, all of these things, they're built to make this system work. That's how we survive, literally, and then when we stop using them as we age, we tend to then decline. But that knife can be honed and sharpened. And what I think is really fun about what you guys are doing, and we'll want to talk for a couple of minutes also about Bring Your Life resume, is that 29 in some way is a more approachable brand, even though it might be harder than some of these other events, because you don't have to become skilled in riding a bike or swimming. You don't have to go compete at Leadville. You can go out there, with your walking sticks and your sneaks and go up the hill until you just can't do it anymore in a supportive setting. But it's all of those are triggering the same sort of neurobiological response in us, which then triggers the system to work. And so that's the magic, which is putting people into an environment. Because it's always sort of like, what is the motivation for someone? Well, actually, the motivation is actually turning the system on. Because once the system's on, then it works, and it works to our favor. Because then you're like, well, why is Mark going to run 6-minute miles? Because his system is working, and it needs to be satisfied. And it's that simple. But when you turn it off and sit there and just, drink water and watch Netflix, it's not used. And so it never really then achieves. So anyway, long sort of preamble into this sort of what you guys are digging into is really important. But you're doing it at that conscious level, having the biology support it. I don't know if you think about that much, but it'd be cool to then think about, why did you guys then go do this Build Your Life resume? So you got this big event, really cool. Is it now you're trying to operationalize a little more than one event a year, with me thinking more actively about my life? Me, not Joe, particularly, all of us.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, look, the Build Your Life resume story, I mean, that was really, Jesse and I had partnered. We'd launched 29 of 29. And, I was just a business partner to him. And he'd had numerous partners in the past, but this was the business that I was working on with him. And he was really building out his personal brand, and, a very accomplished author, and getting to be a great keynote speaker. And, his personal brand, he was trying to figure out what to attach that to a little bit. What was really going to be his differentiator. And that's tough for Jesse, because he's accomplished so many things, and he crosses so many genres that you can't put him in a box. I think his website says Jesse doesn't fit in a box, and he doesn't even own a box or something like that, right? You can't put him in a box. And so one of the things that he talked about was life resume. And I was like, you've already said it. I didn't coin the term. As much as I'm a branding and a marketing guy, I didn't come up with that. I was like, but building a life resume is your personal brand. That is what it is. And really what Build Your Life resume started at, when I launched that with Jesse, was literally just taking his speech and putting it in a digital format and saying there's only a privileged few that are lucky enough to be working at this company in a room where someone has paid you a lot of money to be a keynote speaker, but there's tens and thousands of hundreds of thousands and millions of other people that would benefit from snippets and stories that you have and a mindset that you have, which is really about so much of what you just talked about, Joe, but it's a life resume that matters. It's not only your business resume. People really focus a lot on a business resume, and that, Jesse and I talk a lot about how, interesting people are more fun to do business with. They tend to be more successful because they have good stories to tell. So you need stories to tell.
No, I think we lost Mark.
Hold on, Mark. We lost you there for a little bit.
Hold on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's
No.
it's okay. We can cut that. You were just saying that people are more fun who have stories to tell.
Yeah. So, you want to be around interesting people. And there's those stories Jesse always talks about. There's stories and those experiences that we have that happen to all of us, right? We all remember, unfortunately, 9/11, right? You can remember certain events that they happen to you and you react. And then there's moments that you go out and create. And 29 and 29 is one of those moments that people will go out and create. They'll remember that moment they put on the red bib for the rest of their life, right? They'll remember because they were so present every conversation going up the mountain, right? You remember facial expressions. You'll remember smells. There's a lot of science behind that. And it's because you're so connected to that moment. You wanted it for so long. And so the idea behind Build Your Life Resume is really, I hate to say it's nothing more than this, but it was really taking a lot of Jesse's thoughts and teachings and bringing them in a much more digestible manner in a digital format. So, they operate as separate companies, but they're built around the idea that we all have stories to tell, and it's better to go out and create your own story. And that's what's more interesting than I grew this business unit from 50 million to 100 million. That's great in one aspect of your life. But I think it shows a lot more when you kind of take on these challenges, take interesting trips with your kids, learn a new language. That's the stuff that I want to have on my life resume. There's stuff from my business that'll be on there, but that's just one pocket of what makes up each of us.
Yeah, Mark, one of the beautiful things about your event and building your life's resume, and I love that, is there's many different ways to do that, through family and through business and on and so forth. But the beautiful thing about 29029 is it's nothing more than effort. It's nothing more than just putting your boots to the ground and working hard. And then, it's not that if, there's going to be a moment in time that you're going to want to quit. It's how many of those are going to come up and how do you circumnavigate those? Sit with those thoughts for a while, come to understand them, and then break through. I think that's one of the things. It's one of the really significant missing pieces in our world in 2021 is, we sit around and complain about, what's difficult and challenging and painful, all the while we're walking through a grocery store with 20,000 food items. You didn't need to hunt, gather, grow, prepare. Like we live very softly and very comfortably. And I think that people are looking for opportunity to seek discomfort and to seek something that's hard. And is that the typical demographic of the person that comes out to your races?
Yeah, look, without a doubt, I agree with so much of what you just said. I think that we both now said seeking discomfort, right? Which is interesting. There were a few other ideas that Jesse and I've had and we'll be implementing at some point in the future. And, I like the term unsettled, right? The unsettled. You're looking for people that don't want to settle. 29 and 29 is this interesting mix of, yes, people want to take on something hard, but there's a lot of hard stuff you can go and do, right? So not to push back, but Ironman is really hard. Qualifying for Boston is really hard. Like there's a lot of you can go do rim to rim, right? You don't have to pay a race director. There's a lot of great stuff out there to do that's hard. We wanted something that you would get all the benefits of doing something really hard, have an amazing story to tell, but really have end-to-end support all along the way. Because what I found was when I signed up for Leadville, I had no idea what the hell to do next. I didn't own a hydration pack. I didn't have hiking poles. I didn't have a coach. I didn't know anyone who'd run 100 miles. I didn't know where the hell to start, right? I didn't know what to eat, how to fuel. So the idea behind 29 and 29 was like, trust us, right? It's a big step of trust, but we have some of the best coaches. We have some of the best products. We have training programs for you. We make it turnkey. And yes, there's a business reason behind that, but the main reason is to make the upsell front easy, the sale up front easier. Just take out all of the challenges from a decision-making process and say, we got you covered in each one of these buckets. It's still going to be really hard, but if you get to the event and you have an issue, we have massage therapists on call. We have physios on call. We have, Normatech, boots, and, you have everything. So you get those comforts to where you feel like you're fully supported in achieving your goal and not just like pushed out the window of an airplane and you got to, build your parachute on the way down, right? So it's, these other events are awesome, but they're too intimidating to the majority of the population. And I don't mind saying that, like, we're a great bridge from I want to do something really hard, but I want someone to hold my hand along the way because I'm not quite ready to figure this all out by myself. And that decision fatigue that's real in a lot of other events, we wanted to remove from people. And then we really wanted to just have an awesome experience for people to where they just couldn't walk away and say, man, they should have invested in this, or they should have done this. And it was really just to just say, how would the Four Seasons, how would a Rosewood host an endurance event? What would they do to where every touch point on the customer has been very thoughtfully executed and done in a seamless manner? And so you just look at some of those best brands in hospitality and say, how do they do things and how can we translate those learnings into an ultra endurance event? So people who are used to traveling to those properties or people who are maybe unaccustomed to endurance sport will feel very comfortable and I don't want to use the word pampered, but cared for when they're at an event and not feel like they're on their own.
Yeah, that is a really interesting, there's so much dynamic to that. There's one, which is each of us as we move along on our own journey and have the experiences, sort of have an obligation to support others, right? And one of the things that I'm sure we all run into is someone says, oh, Mark, I can't run with you. You're too fast. And you're like, no, you don't understand. I want to run your speed when I'm with you.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
Myself, like I'll run fast or,
right.
But I'm not ever going to try but you guys sort of neuter that point, right? Because it isn't a race against anyone else and they don't find that really fast person who they're competing against. So that's brilliant. I think that it's a permission opportunity that often we don't give ourselves to go try to do something in a safe world, right? That's better than that. But one other thing I just wanted to touch on, you struck a chord with, I've worked on this sort of brand myself for 25 years, like if you were to meet someone who knew me 25 years ago, they'd probably say the same exact thing, like, oh yeah, and he wears a black shirt and runs in sneakers and whatever it is. But one of the things that I realized in this supportive mode was that you can do it more broadly than just for yourself. And one thing when my kids were growing up, my oldest was 8, we decided we were going to visit all 50 states by the time she turned 18. It's going to be this long-term family journey. Not many people go see all 50 states. I think it's like 0.25% of Americans do that. You'd have to do a lot of work and planning, but it would be fun, and it's a long, like the benefit of learning endurance is it's what life is, right? It's an endurance event itself. But then think of the stories that can be told from all participants who go on the journey. And then you start to build your own storylines. And I think that there is stuff that outside of what we do that can be constructed in similar ways. Let's go visit more of the national parks than other people. Let's do something. Everyone is sitting around their dinner table or driving in their car listening to the podcast. Use some of your time just to dream up your version of 29029 and do that. And then if you want supported events, go do them. But we can do both because that's one time in the year. We got all this other time in between that we should be doing something. And that's where I like the Build Your Life resume is more than a bridge. It's the life part, right? It is consciously thinking each year, like, okay, what's this year about? Like one year I watched 1,000 TED Talks because I thought I could hang out with smart people. Like I didn't go to Harvard, but I could hang out with smart people. So it's all there, those resources. And that's what I like about what you guys are doing is you tap into those resources when people might not have the imagination and then you normalize the imagination and make it accessible, and then they can come on the journeys, because that's easier than having to do all that other thinking. So, like, how do you think about, the evolution of what you guys are doing, with the success this year? You have you have 3 locations for 29.029 coming up, right?
Yeah, we have 3 locations and 4 events. Actually, we're doing back-to-back weekends in Utah. So we're doing Sun Valley, Idaho, in just under a month, and that'll be an amazing reunion of sorts, because we had a lot of people who were signed up last year, and we had to postpone the event. And those that needed refunds got them, and those that stayed on for the journey really have a unique story to tell, right? Because they had to train for an event. It got removed from them. It got taken away from them, as we all had a lot of things taken away from us last year. And then they had to renew that commitment this year. So I think that reunion that's going to take place on the mountain is going to be fantastic. Then we're at Snow Basin, Utah, and Idaho for back-to-back weekends at the end of August. And then we're back to the original location in October, where you did back up in Vermont at Stratton Mountain. So that's exciting for us in this calendar year. I think one of the things that I'm challenging myself and my team and my partners with is kind of what's next for us, right? And holding this brand very close, it's thinking about, interesting to think about partners and what type of partners. We've never had any sponsors. We've never made any revenue from sponsors. My previous business, most profitability was only made from sponsorship. It's been a completely different business model. But what partners could improve part of the training, part of the content that's delivered ahead of time, from nutrition and mindset? So that's been a focus. The price point is unapproachable to a lot of people, although it's a heavily catered experience, and it includes a lot. Over a $4,000 ticket, no matter what's inclusive in it, does exclude a lot of people. So how can we take the same type of experience and maybe not make it last 36 hours? Maybe not provide as much support, but still allow people to try something really hard with the way that we want to approach and execute events. So just thinking a lot about that. And then the opposite side is we've opened the door for a lot of people, and they've said, oh, wait, if I can be on my feet for 30 hours, maybe I can do a 50 miler. Maybe I can do a 100 miler. And I'm encouraging those. But is there anywhere where we want to play in that conversation with the way that we would organize those races and challenges, to where maybe it's not vertical feet, but it's the same type of utilizing what I would say what are our core competencies, right? We care about the customer through and through. We're really thoughtful about the story that you're telling, and giving you every access and resource to really champion your success by having one party be in control of your entire journey. So if you take that, you're like, why couldn't this be on a bike? Why couldn't this be done on skis? Why can't we do it over a longer distance? And not just talking about vertical gain. So those are things that I'm thinking about a lot more now, as it's not only wanting to go deeper in what we call, endurance hiking, but how can we maybe take the way that we approach an event and get in some different modalities and distances as well, not spreading ourselves too thin. But it's exciting to think about how we can play in that same journey, wherever it may be, before our event as a feeder, or after, when we graduate to the next thing. Because everyone that's done this their mind's going to be open to something. Some of them are going to start a business. Some of them are going to write a book. Some are going to do a podcast. A lot of them are like, maybe I should do a different endurance event. And I want to encourage that, but I also would love to be part of that journey as well.
Yeah, Mark, a community builder's work is never done. I love where you're going with this, is that, you've done some really good work. You've created opportunity, but there's more opportunity to be had. And so from a guy like Joe and myself, who are always looking for, these opportunities, these events, these opportunities to push ourselves, we want to thank you for creating these, and in the future, creating even more. I mean, Joe and I are going to be at your events for years to come. And so I want to thank you for your time today, coming on the Chasing Tomorrow podcast and telling your story. And anybody out there, hit on, what's your website? What's the 29.029 website?
Yeah, it's literally the number 29029, so 29,029 feet, and then Everesting, EVERESTING.com. If you do just type in the number 29029 in Google, we're the number one result. So that's probably the easiest way to get there.
You bet. So yeah, all of our listeners, head on over to the website, find out what Jesse and Marc are up to, and get on out there and challenge yourself. So yeah, thanks a lot, Marc, for coming on the Chasing Tomorrow podcast, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Marc.
Dave, Joe, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate it.
See ya.